Welcome back to Final Resonance TV and episode 6 with the magical Jimmy Nutt here in Muscle Shoals. Well, actually,
Sheffield,
Alabama. You're right.
home of Muscle Shoals
That's
Sound
right.
Studios.
That's right. Grammy-winning producer in 2015.
2016. Let's see, 2016 for an album that came out in 2015.
Yeah, Steel Drivers.
That's right. That's right.
Awesome. So, this show is about musical beginnings and kind of through your entire musical path. I kind of want to go back to the very beginning for you.
Okay.
Now, I know James and he's from Shreveport. Were you from Shreveport originally?
Absolutely, yeah. I was actually born in Monroe, Louisiana.
Okay.
Which is a small town a couple of hours east of Shreveport.
Okay.
When I was in the third grade, my folks got divorced and we moved to Shreveport.
Okay.
It was kind of the big city.
Right.
First time I saw a mall.
Right.
So, so we moved to Shreveport, got into the school system there. I guess when I was 12 years old, I started getting into music.
Okay.
And my sister was dating a guy named Joe Lee, and he could play guitar.
Okay.
And so he started showing me some things. I think Back in Black, AC/DC Back in Black was one of the first things I learned.
So, was there anything particular musically that when you were 12 or whatever that...
I don't know, man. My mom...
That just switched, or it was just kind of a gradual...
My mom was way into Elvis.
Yeah.
And she's just a music fan in general, but she specifically loved Elvis. So we had that going on in the house. I don't really have, a lot of musicians in my family, although I'm told my grandmother, grandfather, some of their kin folks would kind of pick and sing on the porch out in the country,
Right.
stuff like that.
They used to call it, the barn dances.
Barn
you ever heard
dances,
that?
yeah, absolutely. So, I don't know, but it certainly was in my memory like a switch flicked on, and man, when I was in. It was over,
At 12?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's all I cared about was music from then on, and I ended up, when I went to, let me think about this, make sure I get this right,
Sure.
Uri Drive Middle School. James LeBlanc and I went to different elementary schools, but we met at Uri Drive Middle School, so I think that would have been the 5th grade.
Okay.
You'll correct me if I'm wrong. And so we met. Really interesting backstory there. This is kind of funny. Someone told me that a guy named James LeBlanc, can I cuss on this?
Sure.
Wanted to kick my ass.
Oh, God.
Okay? Seriously.
Wow.
And I think someone told him the same thing.
Oh, boy.
Okay? We're both kind of scrawny guys. He's a little bigger than I am now, but so we ended up having a class together.
Okay.
And we met, and it was kind of like, hey, I'm Jimmy Nutt. Hey, I'm James LeBlanc. And we just kind of laughed about it. And I have no idea, how that started or who started it or whatever, but true story. Someone told us that. I guess, I don't know, it was fate
Yeah,
that
it
to meet.
happens,
So
yeah.
we met, and we immediately became friends.
Right.
And he was already in a band.
Okay.
He was playing in a band at that time.
And
So they invited me to come to their band rehearsal, and
he was guitar at the time.
he was guitar. He was guitar. He was singing some. There was another girl named Jennifer McMullen, and James and Jennifer kind of shared the singing duties, and they both played guitar. And so I think I'd started taking guitar and drum lessons around that time too. I would take drum lessons, walk across the hall, and take guitar lessons.
Okay.
Did that for a couple of years. But they invited me to their band rehearsal, and they kind of already had it going on, and so I just kind of plugged in as a second drummer.
Okay.
And then it kind of just,
So you're a multi-instrumentalist.
Yeah.
You do bass, you do drums. What else?
And guitar, yeah. I mean, I sang for a while in a band in the 80s. We did like REM and Red Hot Chili Peppers and stuff like that, but I'm not much of a singer. But yeah, I mean...
What kind of stuff are you guys doing?
Back then,
They
were doing, honestly, Sweet Home Alabama was definitely in the repertoire. I think they were doing Can't You See?
Southern rock.
Yeah, Southern. It was definitely kind of Southern rock. I don't remember what else. He will. I don't. But I know early on we were playing like 38 Special, and then we got into like Loverboy and all that stuff. So
yeah, it's funny when I've jammed with him how deep his repertoire goes?
Very deep.
He always surprises me.
And he remembers everything. I don't. I can't.
It always surprises
Yeah.
me. So your path to becoming an engineer obviously grew from that some way.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Well, I was the guy in the band that knew how to hook up a PA. You know, my mom bought me a little acoustic. It was not the brand acoustic. It was an acoustic PA. Had 2 speakers and a powered
Column?
mixer. They weren't columns. They were kind of like probably 12s or 15s, you know.
Okay.
And I wish I still had them, but they're long gone.
Right.
So I had the PA, and I knew how to kind of turn it on and set it up and plug things in. And those guys didn't. They didn't. You know, James never cared about that and still doesn't. But so I started there, you know, and then I ended up getting a Tascam 4-track cassette, you know, multi-track.
Porta Studio.
Yeah, I've
right,
still got it,
right.
you know, still got it. Doesn't work, I don't think, but. And so, wow, you know, all of a sudden we could make recordings. And so I learned that, how to multi-track, how to bounce from one track to the other and do all that stuff.
Right.
And so then, you know, later on in my teenage years, I actually, friend of a friend had a big PA that they wanted to sell. And it was like, you know, tri-amp with crossovers and, you know, all this crazy stuff.
Right.
And so I actually had it installed in a local club in Shreveport and was kind of the sound guy there, resident sound guy there for a while. Started learning that. Had a couple of experiences. There was a band we were in our high school years where we won a talent show, and we won a few hours of studio time at Nightwing Studios in Shreveport. Okay. And I remember the first time I walked into that place and was just like, wow, this is cool, you know. So it kind of was developing early on as far as just sound and recording and the technology aspect of it, you know.
Right. So you just kept on going, kept on
and you know, many years later, you know, married, had a kid, working a day job. I hear about, you know, computer recording, you know, Pro Tools and Macintosh computers, and you know how you can, you know, have this, you know, multi-track, you know, studio in your bedroom for not much money. And that really intrigued me. And I kind of started getting into computers at that time anyway. So I ended up buying a Digi 001, you know, and a Mac, you know, Macintosh. I think it was a G3. I've still got mine too.
Still got it too.
And, you know, just basically sat in my room in my spare time with a manual and learned how to figure it out. Just learned how to operate it.
Right.
You know, and
it's actually a pretty good sounding unit.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you couldn't run you put 2 plug-ins on, the whole system would crash, you know. But I mean, you know, you could make it work, you know.
So when did you make the move to here, to Muscle Shoals?
Well, okay, yeah. So that story is, you know, James and I grew up, played in bands together. When we got out of high school, I moved to Dallas. He stayed in Shreveport. I moved to Dallas because it was a better music scene. I was always looking for, every move I've made in my life, I've tried to get to a cooler, better music scene where I could do something musically.
Right.
Even though I always had day jobs. I would play in bands at night and things like that, weekends. Moved to Dallas, stayed there for about 3 years, played all around Deep Ellum and played with a few different bands. Never could get anything really going on there. James called me from Shreveport, said, you know, let's move to Austin. Let's all move to Austin and go out there and see if we can make it work. So we picked up, moved to Austin, had a band house. We rented this 2-story house, and we had like 6 or 8 people living there, and we rehearsed and we played, and we got a gig at the Black Cat Lounge down on 6th Street in Austin, which was kind of a famous club that no longer exists.
Okay.
We got a weekly gig there, and it didn't do much. And James ended up moving back to Shreveport. I stayed in Austin, played in a few more bands, played in a couple of cool bands, had some things going on, but nothing, you know, enough to like make a living. You know?
Right.
So James moves back to Shreveport. I'm still in Austin. A mutual friend of ours named Dave Hoffpower ends up recording. His band records at Fame Recording Studios.
Okay.
growing up, I had no idea what Muscle Shoals is. I'd never heard of Muscle Shoals, didn't know anything about it. I'm ashamed to say I wasn't listening to those records. I wasn't aware of Wilson Pickett and, Percy Sledge. And I mean, certainly I was aware of When a Man Loves a Woman. But anyway.
Right.
So a mutual friend records at Fame, says, hey, there's this really talented guy, singer-songwriter in Shreveport you need to check out. His name's James LeBlanc, and you need to check him out. So they did. They got in touch with James, Fame. I think it was Rodney Hall or Rick Hall. I'm not sure exactly which one. But and they had James come over, put down some songs, some demos, sing some songs of theirs, just to hear him sing. And they ended up signing him to a production deal, actually first, and then a publishing deal. Mm-hmm. So he started commuting over here every week and getting in with the folks at Fame and getting started there. And he was calling me saying, man, you got to come see this place, Muscle Shoals, Alabama. You got to check it out. It's really cool.
What year is this about?
This would have been 2000.
Okay.
99, 98, 99, and then we moved here in 2000. Okay. So I guess it would have been 98, 99. So at that time, I'm married, have a young kid, 2-3-year-old son, 3 or 4-year-old son, anyway. And so my wife and I came over and visited, I think twice. We came over and visited. We met Rodney Hall at Fame, went to lunch. They showed me the studio. I kind of told them that I was learning Pro Tools at home and basically said, hey, if I were to move over here, could I, work and learn at your studio? And he said, sure, but, there's no guarantees of anything.
Right.
But
so you interned?
Basically, I interned.
At Fame.
Yeah, I interned. And my wife, believe it or not, encouraged me to do it. And so we picked up our family and moved over here. I got a job in Decatur at Decatur Peterbilt selling parts, truck parts.
Okay.
And that's what I was doing in Austin, working in a truck parts store. And 3 months I worked for free at Fame while I had a day job. And then they hired me part-time. And then after 3 more months, they hired me full-time. Don Shrigley was the resident engineer at the time. And he kind of wanted to move on. Mm-hmm. And I happened to be the guy there that had been busting his butt for 6 months, Yeah. And so all of a sudden, I'm the full-time staff engineer at Fame, And, that's when everything kind of started changing for me.
Right, right.
I mean, all of a sudden, I have a job and I can make a living in the music business. I'm 30 years old, by the way.
Right.
And so, we're off to the races at that point.
So when did you leave Fame and do your own thing?
Well, about 3 years in, my main job at Fame was the staff engineer for their publishing company. Okay. At the time, Fame's main business was publishing. Okay, and they had a staff of songwriters, James being one of them. Mm-hmm. And I kind of handled all of that. I handled all the demos, and then would do records on the side. Matter of fact, one of the first records we did was the Decoys, mm-hmm. and then we did a Russell Smith album and did a bunch of cool albums. But we did a James LeBlanc album. Mm-hmm. About 3 years in, they kind of had to size down some things, and they let a bunch of us go, and that kind of, made me move on. I mean, my dream had kind of always been to own my own place.
Right.
So at that time, I set up a studio in my bedroom at home.
Yeah.
And I had some clients, and they kept me working, and I worked for, I made a living in my bedroom at the house, And a few months later, a year, maybe it might have been a year later, Rick Hall called and asked me to come back to work for Fame directly for him. I did that for about 6-8 months, and it just didn't work out for various reasons. And then I rented a space in downtown Sheffield for about 3 years, and then I found this building that I'm in now about 9 years ago and purchased it.
Wow. So obviously it was a bank.
It was a bank.
And you did all this renovation.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing.
Yep. Yeah, it was a bank. It was built in like 54.
Really?
3 different banks, and then it was a church. And
this is a church.
This was a church for a while, and then it sat empty for over a year,
Wow.
And
so how long did it take you to do the reno?
6 months.
Yeah.
6 months.
Yeah, well, that's
and I was still working, across the street at Montgomery Avenue. I was still working there, and I had kind of a second crew, which included my wife and Rob Malone and David McKay and who else am I forgetting? A bunch of folks really helped out. Russell Mefford and all those guys like really put sweat equity into this place. You know,
That's awesome. And it's a beautiful place. She was just talking about that a minute ago.
Yeah.
Talking about how beautiful it is inside and the decor and
Yeah.
how cool you've made it. It's really neat.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really neat. So the Steel Drivers thing, how did that all come about? And you know, what was it like to win your first Grammy?
Well, wow, it was amazing on a bunch of levels. But you know, when I was getting started at Fame in the early 2000s, some of the folks that were around at that time getting their start were, you know, it was Gary Nichols, number one.
Right.
We did an album on a band he had called Gulliver, you know. That was a kind of a weekend project that I did with those guys. And so I met Gary, became friends with him. We stayed friends and worked together all through the years and on lots of different projects. Another person that was getting their start at Fame at that time was Jason Isbell, you know. And did 3 records with Jason and a live album. And so, you know, fast forward 2015, or I guess it might have been 2014 when Gary joined the Steel Drivers, but Chris Stapleton left the Steel Drivers. Gary Nichols got the job. He replaced Chris in Steel Drivers. So they made a record with Gary in Nashville, and actually we cut all of his vocals here. It was called Hammer Down. And the record did well.
I remember that record.
Yeah, the record did well, but and I think Gary was mostly responsible for, you know, encouraging them to come down here to cut their next record.
Right.
But also the movie Muscle Shoals had come out.
Oh, okay.
And you know, the awareness on Muscle Shoals was pretty big at the time.
Right.
So the Steel Drivers decided to come down and cut their next record with me here at the Nutt House. They produced it themselves. I was the recording engineer. Cody Simmons was the assistant, and we cut it here. They did a few things in Nashville, a few background overdubs, but mostly all done here. And I mixed it here.
Awesome.
And, you know, certainly thought it was a great record. And, you know, like I do most things I work on, you know, you want to like it and you feel good about it. But when we turned it into the mastering engineer who happened to work for the label, Concord Records, I forget what division. Concord's the big record company, and Steel Drivers is on one of their subsidiaries. But anyway, turned it into the mastering engineer, and he was kind of one of the first folks to go, this is going to get a Grammy nomination.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And so it's like, really? What? You know? Wow. So you know, you start thinking about that. You're like, wow. You know, and they had been nominated 3 other times for a Grammy and hadn't won yet. So, you know, we, you know, buy our tickets and, you know, rent a tux and, you know, buy a new dress.
Saw all your pictures.
And, yeah,
that was awesome.
You know, and go to L.A. and do the whole deal, you know. And the cool thing about it is, you know, there's over 70 categories. You only see like 10 of them at night.
Right.
But there's a show during the day that's actually really cool. You can kind of, it's in a different theater. You can come and go as you want and sit where you want. So we walked in for our category, which was about midday, and we immediately found Jason Isbell, you know.
Yeah.
So
you were sitting with him.
Me, Gary Nichols, Jason Isbell, my wife, Rodney Hall was there with one of his artists. And we're all sitting right there together at the Grammys. And Jason's category happened to be right before ours.
That's right.
So he goes up, wins a Grammy. We, you know, Steel Drivers goes up, they win a Grammy, and you can imagine.
I remember the reaction.
Yeah, you can imagine the excitement.
That was pretty cool.
So, yeah, I mean, unbelievable, you know.
Yeah, then you get your trophy, which we can see back there.
Get the trophy, man. It takes a while to get it. You know, the one they hand you on stage is a kind of a prop, and they, you know, like 3-4 months before it comes in the mail, and every day you're just like, is it here yet? You know.
I remember when I was here, I was like, is it here yet?
Yeah.
I want to see that thing.
It's like
that's cool.
You don't really believe it till it shows up with your name on it. Right. So
let's talk about Nature of the Beast.
Yeah, Nature of the Beast.
Your latest thing with James.
Absolutely, yeah. James and I did a record last year called Nature of the Beast. I'd always wanted to do a record with James, just me and him. I wanted to be involved in the production of the album. I always heard him kind of in a more raw state, not a lot of bells and whistles, just his songs, him singing. And so we got together and just did it, you know. I mean, I have the facility. He's my oldest and best friend in the world. I just said, man, let's just do it. And we borrowed a few $1,000s from a friend to pay the musicians, and we just made the album that we wanted to make.
Right.
And it was a good album, and we started playing it for a few folks. And Keith Stegall happened to be poking around the Shoals around that time. He, was kind of interested in coming down to the Shoals and doing a few things. So on a trip down with a mutual friend, they brought him to the studio to see the Nutt House. We got to meet Keith and, the friend Brad Chrysler, actually, who's a mutual friend of James's, knew we had done a record on James, and he said, play a song for Keith.
Okay.
So we're like, sure, that'd be great, So Keith pulls up to the board, and we played Nature of the Beast for him.
Yeah, awesome song.
Yeah, and he literally turns around with a tear in his eye,
yeah.
and just
Killer
says,
song.
wow, what else you got,
Yeah.
And so, he pretty much, didn't say it that day, but pretty much we start hearing, he wants to put this record out. And so that's when James and I started kind of saying, wow, let's do this. And I kind of said, hey, if you're going to do this, I want to do this.
Right.
Let me be your bass player. So,
right.
Here we are, playing some shows and trying to do it.
Seeing what the next thing brings, right?
Yeah, this is my job. I'm not going to quit making records.
Right.
But my goal now is to select artists that I want to work as a producer,
right.
still mix, still engineer, and then tour part of the year. So that's my goal now.
Kind of do all the things you love.
Yeah.
That's what it's about, right?
My kid's raised, and I can go do it if I want.
That's awesome, man.
So, yeah.
That's awesome. So I've got these 5 questions
Yeah.
or 4 questions at the end
Okay.
that I ask. And
Yep.
I ask them to everybody, and I try to throw one in that I haven't asked before every
Okay.
time. So
All right.
the first question is, in one word, describe what music means to you.
Gosh, the first word that came to my mind is everything, but that's
There you go.
that's kind of scary because my wife sees this, she's gonna be
she's
mad,
right, yeah.
But it's, I don't know, man. It's been so much of the fiber of my being, for so long. It's obviously it's not everything, but that is the word that came to my mind.
Awesome. Awesome.
So.
So the state of the music business, this is always a big
Yeah.
topic. What do you think? And what's your take on that?
Man, I don't know.
With all the
There's
Spotify
yeah.
and this, that, and the other.
There's so many ways to look at it. One way to look at it is it seems like people are more into music than they've ever have been.
Right.
The other side of it is there's a lot of songwriters and musicians who can't make a living, and so I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just.
And there's a focus on live.
If you got into this thing for money in the beginning, you got into it for the wrong reason
I've
anyway.
heard that before.
And, if you love making music, make music.
Right.
I don't know, man.
Right,
I can't change it. I hope some laws, I hope some laws get passed to help songwriters get paid more per stream.
Right.
That needs to happen.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So advice to young musicians and engineers.
Yeah. Man,
You kind of said it.
Yeah, anything you set your mind to, you can do, number one. Number two, if you work hard enough at it.
Right.
If you work hard enough at it. And that's the thing a lot of people miss is, this isn't easy.
Right.
It takes a lot of work, a lot of determination, and you put your 10,000 hours in,
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So your tracking and mixing process, you primarily do live?
Well,
or
it
combinations,
depends.
or just depends?
It depends. If I'm working as the producer, if I'm the producer, then I'm going to try to get as much live as I possibly can.
Right.
Now most singers, we have to go back in and redo vocals, and that's fine.
Right. That's pretty standard.
But as an engineer, someone comes in, brings a project, we'll do it however they want to do it.
Right.
I love to record a live band in the room.
Right.
That's great.
And you got a great room for
That's
it.
my preference. Yes.
Yeah, it's a beautiful room and a
Yeah.
beautiful studio.
Yes.
Well, I appreciate you being on this today with me.
My pleasure.
And thanks for doing that,
My
Jimmy.
pleasure, Jeff.
Y'all come
Yeah.
see the Nutt House.
Yes, sir.
And check out Jimmy online and James's new album, Nature of the Beast, online. You can also, of course, download that thing.
Absolutely.
Buy that thing and sign up for James's newsletter so that
That's
you
right.
guys can keep up with what they're doing on the road and
Absolutely.
whatever else comes up. Thanks again, man. I really
My pleasure,
I
Jeff.
appreciate it. Thank
All
you very
right.
much,
Yeah,
man.
thank you.